Right, next one. I'm now making the bolster. We'll finish that roughly. Techniques. We'll go back to techniques. You kind of notice I'm quite eclectic when I approach the subject, so I move all over the place all the time. I think that might partly be me. Well, obviously it's me, but I think it's also partly Ledall. And to understand it and to realise how things work, you've got to understand different bits of different things before you can move forwards. That said, we'll get back to techniques. So I talked about double rounds, essentially any horizontal strike. So you could do true edge, push through, slice back. There's certainly no mention of false edge. In fact, there are no mentions of false edges at all. It doesn't deal with true or false edge in any way, shape or form. He kind of knows what you're doing and expects a level of understanding from you as a student. But we'll go and actually talk about stuff instead of me just waffling. Well, I'm still going to waffle, but it'll be a different type of waffle. So we'll go back to double rounds, as I said. Rounds, horizontal strikes. As I say, it's difficult to say one way or another. You can use what else is in the manuscript and go, well, there's this round thing going on in a tumble, and he says to tumble forward as round as a ball. I think they just worked in more than one plane, so that's a tumble. If you're going forwards with this, that's essentially your tumble. Your round needs to be something else, and that it's not as specific. As I say, I teach it that way, and that's just the way it is. So the key thing with the rounds to make them work, essentially, I actually pinched something from the Harleian manuscript because he talked about double rounds with 3 feet outward and as many homeward, homeward, it's Geordie. Or at least a northeastern accent. You have to be born within the town walls of Newcastle to be a Geordie. And to me, this is what really makes it work. Is your 3 feet outward and as many homeward. Feet, we're still imperial in this country half the time, so 3 feet is a measurement. It's not steps, it's not a number of steps. Hopefully that hasn't fucked. No, that's trimmed it nicely. So 3 feet outward, literally on your first strike, you're going to step right out to the side and bring this horizontal strike in. This gives you the big advantage that if it's coming into me as an opponent, coming down the centre line, if I'm taking 3 feet out, the attack isn't coming into here, it's coming in towards the back of the head. Again, something we see a lot of in the Towton, and I'll probably talk about that later when we get into quarters and stuff. But what we do see on 3, possibly 4 bodies in the Towton is a horizontal cut to the mastoid process. The mastoid process is this lump at the back of your ear here. That's where I think this strike's coming in. That's why I think it's horizontal. I'll match it up. Again, not a hugely big powerful strike, but by coming out to the side, if I'm defending and I'm not necessarily voiding with it, my defence has to come out quite wide in order to be able to cover the fact that he's coming around in towards the back of my head. He's now stood off this sort of angle, somewhere off screen. So my defence comes here, so that this push comes here. So bang, I come through with my forwards, so I get the right foot, bang, push with my forwards and then step, and I'm bringing myself back through, lifting my hands high so that it's covering across the top of my head, and that his sword is in the L of my blade and cross. And again, if we look at the English long swords, the English two-handed swords, very wide crosses, 30-40 centimetres, perhaps even more on some of the big examples, so that you've got this whole coverage as you're coming through, and that you're playing with these lines of attack. And that's something we'll talk about a lot later on as well, because Ledall does it a lot. So that's basically where we're at in terms of the double rounds. It's a double, they're connected. They're rounds, they're not vertical strikes, they're not downward strikes, they're not following through, they're paired actions. So double, one side, double to the other, pushing forwards, pushing backwards. Why do they appear in the manuscript? They appear, I think it's 8 out of the 13 chases start with a double round, or a double round forwards, and they're often in pairs of doubles. So you'll get 2 double rounds forwards, 2 double rounds backwards. So again, series, long consequences attacks. I mean, essentially, 2 double rounds forwards, 2 double rounds backwards, or 2 double rounds forwards and as many backwards. It's 8 techniques. Don't know about you, but the chances of me being able to pull off 8 techniques against an opponent in a row that I chose in quick succession is probably quite slim. My opponent's going to do things that are going to prevent me from being able to do essentially the same kind of technique 8 times, just changing sides and changing some bind concepts. So to me, and the way I used them when I was teaching is, and that's the way I use Ledall's things, is they're drills, they're lessons, and what you do is you just ram this drill in until you can do it at full speed with a partner. Particularly because, I mean, some of the longer ones are like 14, 15, 16 techniques long. I mean, if you can do that, you probably could have killed him a lot quicker, or wounded him, or hit him, or struck him, or scored a point, or whatever it is the aim of these things is. So I see them as being a drill, and this is the thing to learn. And when you start watching and you look at people, skilled fencers in tournaments, you do get this whole wind and just verge to one side to the other. Sometimes with a big helicopter, don't like big helicopters. As I say, so even when you're going backwards, disengage the blade, re-engage the blade, coming through. There's a cron, to re-engage their blade, keep it out of the way, and then you can strike through. So the sword is invariably always in front of you. You never want your blade behind you with your hands out exposed. Yeah, if you do it quick enough, it's not going to matter too much, but you try and cover your hands at least. So that's the double round. It introduces me also, actually, I'll jump out from what a thing again. There is a phrase at the end of several plays, and if it that Ledall uses, sorry, and if it be twice played, it will bring you to your ground. And people think you just do the drill twice. I used to think that, but ground could be the area you're fighting with, and it brings you to your correct distance. Or ground is your grounding, your understanding, a grounding in a subject. I have a good grounding in archaeology. So these are words that we use in terms that we use them, and ground means an understanding. And when it says, if it be twice played, it will bring you to your ground, he's saying that there are 2 different ways about doing this. Start fitting in with concept of forwards and backwards again. So is it the 5th? I forget the titles of the chases. I know what goes on in them, and that's the important bit for me. Now, which way? I'm trying to think of the exact phrasing. But basically, one of the plays is 2 double rounds, and if it would be twice played, it brings all their contrary to your man. So it brings all against your man. I think a little bit more. 2 double rounds twice played. 2 double rounds forwards, 2 double rounds backwards. That fits with what he teaches in other lessons. So when you come to the first chase, which is a full stroke, a 4-point and a quarter lightly delivered, and if it would be twice played, it would bring you to your ground, is that depending on what your opponent does in that first full stroke, as a response to your first full stroke, guides you on how you make that double round forwards. So when we were talking about the forwards and backwards in the round, you can work the same with a full stroke. So I bring him a full stroke, he parries it on the underside. My forwards is to push forwards and wind through and push up high. Once that's displaced, then I step around with my quarter, lively delivered, or lightly, with agility, basically. So it's about controlling my distance and my measure and stepping wide rather than straight down the centre line. If I come in with my full stroke and he doesn't bind underneath, but then does a downright stroke on the top, and we'll come to what a downright stroke is more accurate later on. If I try winding up again, he brings his point into my face. I don't want to do that. But if he's over the top of me, I can wind up onto the other side. I'm still pushing my hands forwards and thrust low. If he then displaces that, then I can come off over the top and strike my quarter lively delivered, taking it out to the right side. So twice played, two different ways of doing it depending on how your opponent bites. So that's another good one. So full stroke. What is a full stroke? There's not a lot of them. So it doesn't give us a lot of information to work from. And a full stroke doesn't mean all the way down to the ground. Possibly. It's not the interpretation I've gone with. I've looked a bit more into the rest of the source. And when he uses the term full, it's most commonly used in concept of springs. And there's a lot of footwork attached. So with springs, there is a spring, a full spring, a short spring, and a full short spring. And what you always notice about a full spring or a full short spring is that they're from the right hand side. So to me, particularly in reference to the first chase, the full stroke, from the right hand side, setting in or springing with the pass of the right foot. So you start left foot forward, and the right foot then passes the left as the action goes through. So the full stroke to me is from the right hand side, which makes sense. It fits with some of the other definitions and things. But the important part of the full and the stroke, I mean, essentially it's a full power strike. And what you're hoping to gain from that is a strong bind, and that it is straight down the centre line. I don't think the majority of Ledall's footwork works down the centre line, as we've just discussed with the rounds. 3 feet outward and as many hammered, that you're constantly changing these lines of attack. These springs that I'll come to later, again, massive changes of line, if not through 90 degrees, so that it's avoiding the centre line. But the full stroke doesn't. It's hard, it's fast, it's a strong attack. It's initial attack. You know, we all know your initial attack doesn't necessarily, rarely works. It's always second intention attacks are what we're looking for. So full stroke is hard and fast, straight down the centre line. It's to dominate that centre line, to close as fast as possible, and it's complete in itself. After that, it doesn't really matter what the strike is with the blade. It's a stroke, it's a strike. It's almost irrelevant. Because the important concept here is to attack him hard down the centre line. And doing so facilitates you then doing your quarters lively further down. Because you've come hard and fast, you've closed distance quickly, you've got him onto the back foot potentially, and therefore you're in closer so that you can start to move around him much more readily. So that's your full stroke. Brings us to a 4-foin. Should have perhaps explained that before I tried explaining the technique. So 4, forwards, backwards. A 4-foin is a thrust that moves forwards with opposition. So full stroke, hit hard, get a strong bind, forwards, push the hands forwards through his blade to create your next attack, to find your next place. Quarter, well, we've kind of covered quarters earlier on. Lightly, with agility. All he's saying is, and you get this as well. So the first counter, a proffer is face standing still, then setting the right foot with a rake and a quarter and another void. So actually, no, that's not the play I'm thinking about. I've forgotten where I was going. But anyway, lightly. It's all about you being within range and that if all you do is step directly towards your opponent, you're going to be too close to hit him with the sword. And Ledall doesn't like getting that close. So, other quick reference, not mentioned it before, perhaps should have done. Ledall has one play, perhaps two, that might represent any form of grappling. In a true sense, there's perhaps another ones where you're proffering a rake with the right hand, so rake, and then with the right hand strike the quarter. You're in close enough to be able to touch his hands, so you might palm his hands out the way to interfere with his defence. But by and large, there's no grappling, and there is an awful lot of this setting and voiding and moving in and moving out. And certainly, if your opponent starts coming to you, let alone just void out if you're not comfortable with it. If you're not able to do your proper rake quarter. Or your rebet or whatever thing he wants you to use, your spring. I'd say that's part of the key understanding of his system, his key ground. So we don't really need to cover quarters. They'll come in as we start looking at individual players. I'll probably have to do something with them. So first chase, full stroke, 4 fine, quarter. That's if you've got a static parry. If he's displaced you, full stroke, 4 fine, pushing in again. And as that goes round, step off. And so full stroke with a step, you push forwards and step in with the left foot so that you're winding up onto your right hand side to come down into his pelvis. There is with skill 8 remains from the Battle of Towton, which has a stab wound into the pelvis, and it's not a single point. If it was an arrow coming through, you'd expect a single point of contact. It's a sword. I perceive it as being a sword because you've got a big wound as it goes into the bone of the pelvis, and then you've got repeated other marks. And if you've come in and stabbed into there, as he goes down, you're going to continue to push him down to make sure he's going down. But if that gets displaced, then you step out with your quarter lively delivered, and there you are. So that's rounds, double rounds, full strokes, bit on quarters, 4 fine. So back thrusts. Everybody wants to know how you do the back thrust. There is no one way to do a back thrust. In the same way, there's no one way to do a double round. It's any horizontal strike that facilitates a second horizontal strike, either forward or backwards. So back thrusts, as you say, made setting in, made voiding out, definitely, and made standing still. So perhaps a key one, it comes after you double round forwards, double round backwards. So I've ended up double round forwards, double round backwards. I end up in this position. Depending on where my opponent is, he may have done things that how to explain it. Basically, depending on what my opponent's done, it's going to depend on what I've done. The best defence to a double round forwards or a double round backwards is to actually, after you've defended the first one, is to move back with a back thrust. That's why it's in there after those things. That back thrust is associated with that. So that you've got these double round forwards, double round backwards, down, then it would be downright stroke voiding back the left foot in some, but then moving back into a back thrust voiding back the right foot. If you're using it as part of an attacking sequence, so double round forwards, into there, he's parried on that side, you then bring the blade back and thrust. Down into the low target again, into his chest would be ideal, getting it nice up and high into here, stops his arms coming down into an attack with you. And it really is simple. It's invariably voiding back the right foot as well, so it's coming up onto this right hand side all the time. So in the same way that if I've been the man attacking me, I'm being attacked by a double round forwards, I parry here, he pushes me out, I'm right foot forwards because I've voided back to defend the first one, he's pushed through to come in with the other attack, I literally just push my point forwards and step back and bring it back to make sure that my defence is secured first as a void back. I'm nice and secure, and then I'm underneath, so I can then thrust back through to it. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. You can always hassle me and I'll do some better stuff. Obviously, sat in a workshop, not the greatest, but it got me started and talking about this stuff, and I did say I was going to do some talking about it, so I'm going to waffle. Downright stroke, downrights. I think these are quite interesting. downright strokes, downwards from the right hand side, definitely. We know that much. Downright stroke, voiding back the left foot, is the primary use. There is one other use of it, which is a downright stroke at his head, setting in with the right foot. But so we've still got this right foot, finishing right foot forwards. And how to describe what it is. Looking from the concept, you've just done 2 double rounds forwards, 2 double rounds backwards, and then you do a downright stroke voiding back the left foot. Taking this as part of a drill, the way I've always taught this is you do 2 double rounds forwards, 2 double rounds backwards. Your opponent voids out through these using essentially a downright stroke or a parry, an in-stop, as the earlier English sources would call it, an in-stop or a downright stroke. To deal with that until you come to the end of that, then he comes back through with them. And you can do that as a floor drill itself. You do 2 double rounds forwards, he does 2 double rounds forwards. Because ultimately, as you come back with the back thrust, you can also then wind up underneath as you step in, and you can do your rounds back at him. And it works as a really nice floor drill. You can build up lots of rhythm and then start focusing. Once you've got those, really start focusing on the details of your footwork, because all your parts of your body kind of know what they're doing. If he's coming in and he's bringing a horizontal straight over here, this downright stroke to the left foot is an ideal parry. Defence. Shouldn't use the word parry. It's not a parry. It's a displacement, in my mind. So it comes down and it's hard and it's powerful, but it stops here. Because anything that's coming in from above, if I come down on top of it, means I've dominated it. I've got my cross, big light English crosses, that's covering a substantial amount of my torso, especially considering cones of attack and cones of defence. I've got a substantial amount of defence in the top, but I hit hard, and it's a jab. It's not a full powerhouse all the way down through to the ground. I don't want to end up all the way down here with all this exposed. I want to stop him here. I've got the cross coming down beneath me, I've got the cross coming up above. I'm nicely covered from that, and the void and that give me time to be able to think what I can do next, or to assess what he's doing next and work with it. So I consider a downright stroke as being a displacement, and this kind of figures with the downright stroke at his head setting in with the right foot. That what you're actually doing is, instead of attacking in a traditional way with a quarter, which you could have said, setting the right foot with a quarter, or a quarter. He doesn't always get specific right foot because everybody knows how they work with quarters. So he could have gone for that and just done that. But I think what he's talking about is changing your line of attack. So rather than it just being an angled strike into one of the quarters, you're considering where his blade is, and as you step in, you're changing how you attack so that you strike into his blade and displace it and strike through. It's not just ploughing through from power from an outside line. You're taking a more of an inside line, more of a vertical line, and hitting against his weak to push through towards his head. So downright stroke, usually voiding back the left foot, always finishes right foot forward, and it's a displacement. It's why we see these defences. To start bringing it into wider context, George Silver basically says, bring me a fencing master and I shall break him of his fencing hall tricks with solid downright blows. That's what it is. It's not that he's just going to batter hell out of him. It's that your downrights have to be hard. You're slamming onto the flat of your opponent's blade, and that's what you're looking to do. Is you're actually looking to strike into your opponent's flat as hard as you possibly can without following through. Yeah, so you're still not coming down beneath your shoulder level, but it's hard, and you're really hammering that through onto there. It's a solid downright blow, and it's used to deny the bind, or a useful bind for your opponent, and to shock his hands. It will shock his hands. You know, there is stuff you do it, get the timing right and the right angles, and you'll knock the blade out of his hand. Particularly as he's probably not expecting that type of thing coming through. So that's where we are. And you know, when you're looking at complicated bind techniques, it's just total dominance over the top of the blade. Probably different in silver. He may come further down, single-handed weapons and rapiers and whatnot. But that's my interpretation of the downright stroke. It's a displacement. It must be defensive. The amount of times that it's used on a void certainly suggests that we've got a strong defensive blow. So we've got 4 thrusts, 4 foins, back thrusts, double rounds, full strokes, downright strokes. Next, we will look at springs, and I'll do that in a different video because it will be a long one. Okay. See you in a bit.